다디래 도 실로카 니시자 숨소주 버들 아 도나 칸데 쳔람 치치 장스 아 랑기 센지 네게 진다시 진드 텐다 시제 뎀바이 진데 두바제세 라레 예스 다디데 라데가라 칼나 도나 다 칸다 돈도 도두요이나 칸데 도와이나라 칸데 쳔짬 칸데 도와이나레 가르치 피제 땅와이나레 쳔람 칸데 치와이나 카도 카디 카사 가르치요이나레스 랑기 센지 네게 수수수도 카도 네게레 수수 센라 따지 치고레스라 진드 텐다 시제 나저 템바다 시제라니라 운디 아니 레버땡 오레스라 텐다 시제 뎀바 이스 아니 젠더 두바제셀라다 간다 먼저 이칭 미스나라 가르치고에나 수수 가와시 카도에나 수수 센라 따지치 아니치 대시아보테 아니치 젠더 두야라 텐데라 베즈체다 텐데기 주바디 아니 제세 상시 삼바도즈게 아니 얌네 레스
Now we are at verse number 36. In short, no matter what one might be doing, by examining always the status of one's mind with continuous mindfulness and alertness to bring about the good of others, this is the practice of all the Bodhisattvas. So, to sum up, no matter where one is, whatever you find yourself doing, it is always important as a part of our spiritual practice to always observe our mental state and to observe our mental states with continuous mindfulness and awareness, mindfulness and vigilance, so that we can bring about the good of others, so that we can be of service and help to others. This is the practice of all the Bodhisattvas. So in all your conduct, to always observe what arises in the mind, what shapes the mental state, what informs our actions. This is the practice of the Bodhisattvas.
타바가 따세 라 다도에나 시도 따이도 근데 이디가라 아니 템바디 타바나세 파 디퍼룰라 심젠다 땅게 버로 조니로 시라 아니 시젠디 차라따들레 땅게 되시 땅아저기 변은 아저기 로드다 아니 로드 코드 따니시고라 계시 디 아니 아저 로드 파쇼 심바쇼 심바제 도기도 아니 딘데 템바 타바다베 템바디 스테니 수수야 로미바 카레나 들었으샤 라 시젠디 차라따벌레디 먼저로데 가도도 따인다 와 근데 이제 상 대시 때한테 패키지 모든 잠잠한테 직당이 지 냠내지 제바이나 잠잠한테 템바지데 텐히 마텐서 아니 템바지오라 딜라사나 야한테 디갈라 로 디갈 네투나 아니 템바 마지야다 아무치 소소고 로 가와도게메 가르치게메 러차니도 제당들라 아니 상도 코나들라 삼다한테 패키지 모라
So now qualities such as mindfulness and vigilance or alertness are very, very important, not just with regards to our spiritual practice, but in our daily lives. It is important that we cultivate and develop these qualities such as mindfulness and vigilance. Now, if we are to better understand the functions of these qualities, such as mindfulness and vigilance, then the kind of classical analogy, which is very traditional in its nature, is explained in this manner. Mindfulness is like the rope, and vigilance is like the shepherd or the spy. So, in order to ensure that the animals or the sheep doesn't run too far away, then we tie a rope around it. So similarly, mindfulness performs the function to allow the mind to focus on one particular object. And as similarly, then the shepherd also checks to see whether even when the rope is tied around the sheep's neck, the shepherd also from time to time has to check whether the sheep whether the sheep are moving about or are restless from time to time. So, as such, vigilance performs the function of checking whether mindfulness is performing its function or not. So similarly, in our daily lives, it is important that with regards to any kind of activity that we undertake, that we do it mindfulness, that we do it with mindfulness, and that we also are vigilant enough to check from time to time whether our minds are in the present, whether we are able to be in the present with what we are doing.
So, 먼저게 나라서 그 대시 가지 땡이면 나도 산다와이나. 저게 라마니 군다 많이 봤다가서 지치도 거래. 칼라사도 거래, 내가 제가 두고 거래. 테블로라 가는 만부지 지고라. 잠잠 먼저를 지키 딱 군다 수준이만 간장이 가르치셨더니 뒤에 테마만 써야 리다. 라. 제가 따디 영안조지는 같이 겨와 심마심마 전야다 파샤다 아니 센디 되야 파샤죠. 알레 이마치기 된 점도 땡입니다. 라. 제가 간장 상화데 베 인도 바 가사가 인도지들 안 테헤드 스쿠 마투에 강이 chen 된들레와라.
So we can begin to appreciate the manner in which mindfulness and vigilance can help us to become fully engaged with what we are doing, with what we are pursuing. And we begin to understand its implication when we begin to look in the manner in which whether we are able to cultivate mindfulness and vigilance in the course of a day. So for example, from the moment we get up in the morning and until the moment we retire to bed, we are very busy doing a number of things. But if we reflect back upon what we did over the course of a day, sometimes we do not really remember what we were doing at any given time. So as such, mindfulness can help us to become totally engaged with what we are doing at any given time. And it also mindfulness and vigilance can help us to be fully engaged in this manner. Now, let alone being able to remember past lives and so forth, we are not able, or not even able to remember sometimes what we did in the course of one day. So, as such, we understand where we are with regards to training in mindfulness and vigilance. So, we must take it upon ourselves to cultivate these qualities in our daily lives.
라데르드라. 다디가라 디올라드 단다 제듬 니시 손주 소대보다 호하게요 호하들다. 치타르 준비 두비스 겨와나. 다소저 가나서 가르치는 데다 수준 비즈니스는 저신 직 두샤주기 아니 겨와남스. 타이엔로와 다디 소소기 게사샤주 겨와디 아니 타이빈로와 로알라디가라타 란레 셴바데 타이파라 장가메바라. 근데 아니 로 타이비기 아니 그런 타이엔로에 둥이 세비시르스 소소기 겨사지 소소 지부만이 소소기 둥에서 지부만이 그 로 심전 타지기 둥이 파 세기 세 제비시르스라 아니 디야사나 가르타온 단다 가상한서 동반이라 샤샤에 바 코순 라 코순 넘버 타발라디가라타 치당이디 뜻을 삼아 아니 동반이 ngol 바 샤네 아니 코순 넘버 타비스 시진다 진짜 유치타지들 다시 동반이 ngol 타비 토네 아니 상주 모아제세 라레인스라 디 단다 유소소 가나서 겨 강사샤지 아니 스진 타지기 텐데 이바타 대야 아니지 조빌라나 메베 상주기 콤판타웨기 주도 쇼 사메기 되게 사나다 오레라.
Now, the 37th verse is the practice of dedication, and it's a prayer of dedication. The practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to dedicate towards enlightenment all the virtue to be gained through making effort in these ways, with wisdom that is purified entirely of the three conceptual spheres, so as to dispel the sufferings of the infinity of others. So the last two lines. With wisdom that is purified entirely of the three conceptual spheres, so as to dispel the suffering of the infinity of others. So as we already talked about how skillful means and wisdom, the union of this must be established as a part of our spiritual practice. So skillful means the methods in which we train the methods through which we try to be of service to others must be embraced by the wisdom of emptiness, wherein all these means, methods, and practices must be free from conceptual elaborations. And we already talked about these three conceptual spheres through which we begin to relate to others through a process of conceptual elaboration. So, with wisdom that is purified, with the wisdom that is free from all conceptual elaboration, so as to dispel the suffering of the infinity of beings, so as we already discussed, our self is just one, whereas the others are immense and infinite. So the practice of all the Bodhisattvas is to dedicate towards enlightenment, that you dedicate all the virtue that you accumulate in training in these practices towards achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings.
Good. Doje tenje nale sumbi tens tan dora jeda ani tenje nale sumse bigira tenzu gi tenda nam tangban nam jita kanda jig mambo ji dini diriora ani jige jibu tangba do ji she gi chila tangban na ji sungi jeran tata dende doda ha da tenje ta kharin dun changma ani nge kebe ambo jibu tangba na ji sumsha ju di jese thani esla da jese uchi thomi zam khora ani jese nam ji lale sunju dens ta tanda tebdi mile jese lanle soden bala ora tende sunju soden yoba des ani di khari chet zamena na jese lam la lamde chesan tende jese shanju sembe la la jubum de ge lebum de ge jambum de ge kansa duzu gi chide ani korang di zomba yin la ora tende kos.
So now moving on. Here I have set down for those who wish to follow the Bodhisattva path 37 practices to be adopted by all the Buddha's heirs based on what is taught in the sutras, tantras, and treatises, and following the instructions of the great masters of the past. So herein, based on what is taught in the sutras refers to the Buddha's teachings, his own words. The tantra refers to the esoteric practices, and the treatises refers to the subsequent commentaries composed by the classical Buddhist masters on the Buddha's teachings. So based on what is taught in the what was taught by the Buddha himself in the sutras, tantras, as well as the instructions of the great masters of the past, here the author has set forth these 37 practices for those who wish and aspire to follow the Bodhisattva path.
Tatanda di kala khasunla na chida jese lam la hende na gi chid sunla di ta khanda di la lanu chin sin pen chira zin na ta na le de ora chira di joja di thon ani ta nga di jang de ba yesan le ra chesan de zu gi chid sun she res.
So then we should take this last line as it is addressed to us ourselves, because even we are here to study this particular text because we have an interest in understanding these practices.
Da Korangi ngazo kimba chong la jira ti chidir Koran mehini de de chiga maro ya kebe ambu jinjire ine ta susugi keba do kebegi ngaje chomya da kim chong shi de and sungda ra lo dremen shi da Koran sungora de mar tibapo chamba ra lo dremen shi jangba chungwa Koran lo dremen ba shire de ya go meba che ani chige jangchen le ani be chunju shada things over the jacham shi ji mi jami joche ani keba jibi debjur machis ta keba jibala isa china gebara stida undi keba na la chi gawa chewa da go chi ni tinde gi ngala pe tiu de gal debjur ni je ching ni je tinde ngala yo mares me ba ina ya dodang tambi sunla tembi shirres ta nga zo saji gi sunbin dodang ani tambi gi ta jibu tamba na ji sunla ten ye gi chid ra tinde gi to la nyamne che chid ani jesen karsa jese la le chumi sevra jese la le chumi le par semla ta khanda jese shanju semba do gi nyame che ya gi ani nima la le ta ya di ani ko thiba meba ani lebar sevla ta chige kala yang ta ba jin du sambu du ro la semla.
Now what follows is a statement of humility. Now this is This kind of statement is very common in the classical text because it is understandable that scholars and intellectuals and realized masters, they find themselves at points in the danger of giving into arrogance. So it is a custom and a common practice to make such a statement of humility to overcome any sense of arrogance one might develop in composing a text like this. So since my intellect is only feeble and I have studied but a little, this is not a composition likely to delight the connoisseurs. Yet since I have relied upon the sutras and what the saints have taught, I feel these are the genuine trainings of the Buddha's heirs. So even though the author himself is a very accomplished master, then it is customary to make such a statement of humility as a way to overcome any sense of arrogance one might feel about their practice, one may feel about their work and so forth. So he says this is not a composition likely to delight the connoisseurs. It might not have such an aesthetic value to people who place a lot of importance on poetic and lyrical presentation. So as such, it is not likely to delight poets, writers and such. And yet, since I have studied the sutras and what the saints have taught, I feel these are indeed the genuine trainings of the Buddha's heirs. These are indeed the genuine trainings of the Bodhisattvas.
Di Chiloka Jimadi Kazana, Yuan Sra, Yuan Jesse Chuba, Lapchen, Jesse Sanju Sembi Chuba, the Lapchen Reda, Maranzuma Town, the Ra, Susan Yanle Che, the Pasha, the Long, the Loyule Shunko, the Chitus Marsan's leader. Today, any Lapchen Nams, Lome Dande, letting Maran Koran that the Tibo Koran and the Lome Batan, Nadoji Yellow Dande, and Tinda, and Timbacola, the touch. Things so would the Negi and talk how, talk with the Negi in Bishers, and the names are any this Dominicala and Gawatan, and Mandela, the Ching, Tenhashi Mandela, the day Chala, Chai Batan, Tendela Subi, and other no true division, Yevetola da, the day no true by Nas, and Tamba Namjis, Zuban Zedson, and Chibu Tamba Zugi, and Korangi no true that the Tunda and Dewa Hashi Dewa make your order, the day Chayuna.
So following in the same vein, still the tremendous waves of activity of the Bodhisattvas are difficult for simple-minded folk like me to comprehend, and I must therefore beg the indulgence of all the perfect saints for any contradictions, irrelevancies or other flaws this may contain. So, as we can perfectly appreciate that when we think about these practices of the Bodhisattvas, it is difficult to sometimes comprehend them. It is sometimes difficult to relate to. So, as such, continuing with that statement of humility, he at this point says that if in this presentation of the trainings in this particular text that he has composed, if there exist any contradictions, any irrelevancies, or any other mistakes in these presentations, then he begs for the indulgence of the perfect saints.
Tadil Tamadil Kalanaga, Tele Chui, Give, Rock, that's also the Tandaji, so some side the college of San Mamustana, Tele Chui, and so gets a Sasha D's, T. Karsilan, Rock, Majin Dollars, Sinjata, Rockers, that Dick Tandam, Casa, Tandam, Shanchusen, Tandam Senda, Shanchusen, Tandam Shanchusen, the Kodu Shanchusen, the Jatilla, Sanchu Keys, Konzugi, Mipa, Shanchusen, Mipa Kalana, Simjataji, Majis Simjataji, the Mipa shower, Ras, Simjataji, the Ola Kundu shower. Today, and Shanchusen, Chodu Lotes, and Tigalana, and the Siba Shiva. Sipa Quada, Shiva Yamdela Ja, Tella and Minepal, that digging a Sicilian neighbor my impar, Ani Kanda Sanji Comanta, Ra. Ani Tinde Yanets Nanila, Shinris in Gotela, Ra, Tinde Nuba Dengi Sanji Karsa haba shenrezile ani zingo tel tedan sumborshuladi tigi tokpada nyamba shore.
So finally, the last verse. Through whatever merit has here been gained, may all beings generate the sublime bodhicitta, both relative and absolute. So instead of absolute, maybe we use the term ultimate. Generate sublime bodhicitta, both relative and ultimate, and through this come to equal Lord Avalokiteshvara, transcending the extremes of existence and quiescence. Quiescence herein refers to bliss. With the effort that the author has now extended towards composing this particular text, in engaging in the virtuous act of composing this text, any kind of merit he may have accumulated, he wants to dedicate it to all sentient beings being able to generate within themselves the awakening mind of bodhicitta, both relative and ultimate. And through this, may all sentient beings come to equal the Lord Avalokiteshvara, who doesn't abide in the bliss of nirvana, and who doesn't abide solely in the bliss of nirvana, or is neither trapped in samsara, but to be always ready to be of service and help to sentient beings.
Tadigala shanchu gu sem la nganzo karo ko na chita khato nganzo rozun do sawa chera shanchu gu sem la de ani theba chembu gi tes choba ta ra din de shanchu gu sem lo je de kharisna jenda do josha la mi so korang ge jula ani ji kharsa saji gi koma the de be loj gores dia ani susu saje wa da susu chibu jaba che chibu main ke dor sunje thaji dewala ngobi ngogonya be loj gorwa sesan koran shanju seng singi dele khazna jenda do josha la mehi rangi tros chibin deba da chunde de chibi teche lamji jugo chibi choy namre la ra sesan tinde gi loj gor tie kharasna ti lo dranjo le chesna temba chimbu gi tres choba tatel chi chida shanju seng phe de pema she ra ani chi sonam jachembo sawa pena nga zo tongsu tongchembo de yang ani ne de chungwa kesi shanju seng sonam de la pa chi gi shasa gi ne de go na 대야 춘주인바 아니 선어 자체모 더르도 심지 탄지를 땅마 심지 탄지를 지당에 수수기 마다 뜻둥이로 대야 아니 심지 탄지 대화랑 그로 쳐봐야지 봐 근데지래 샹주 선샤워.
So now herein we need to kind of reflect back on our discussion about bodhicitta and understand the awakening mind of bodhicitta more clearly. So as we already discussed, that the awakening mind of bodhicitta is the door through which one enters the Mahayana path. And now, technically, the awakening mind of bodhicitta is understood as an altruistic intention, but this kind of fails to capture the whole essence of it. So when we look at the technical definition of the awakening mind of bodhicitta, then it is technically defined as an altruistic intention that is aimed towards achieving complete and perfect enlightenment, not just liberation, aimed towards achieving complete and perfect enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So this is the altruistic intention that informs the awakening mind of bodhicitta. And now when we are talking about the qualities of such an awakening mind, the qualities of such an altruistic motivation, then there exists quite an extensive discussion on it. But maybe just to gauge the immensity of such and the profoundness of such an altruistic intention, in the many classical treatises, they use this example, that if you gather all the treasures in the three spheres, three realms, and the preciousness of the altruistic intention, these kind of treasures from all the three realms pales in comparison to the preciousness of the altruistic intention. And then we also talked about how in the process of generating altruistic intention, one begins to look at all sentient beings as our mothers, to be able to relate relate to all sentient beings as our mothers.
Ta danda dila thamadla kala cheban de sra rangshen la phen bi shir ta soso la phen da shen la phen bi shir di phen bi thön de ane lung da ripa che ma wi se zumba ta din de jing sanje da ane jaga ke ba ta khanda lung la ke ba che ane ripa ma wala de si nau ji chod chi ba yu ra din de zumba la de ko ta wa jing sara zumba Thokmey Sangpo Thokmey chi is ngu chu 피 사제 파기 점색이 사제 그들에 아니 무치 렌친 푸드 자라라디 근데 사제질라 그런 게 아니 티스 그 사제지 페이지.
So the last line, it's a footnote. This was composed in Jewel Cave in Ngulchu by the monk Thokmey, a teacher of scripture and reasoning for his own and others' benefit. So the scripture herein refers to the sutra and the classical treatises, and reasoning refers to training in rational, having been trained in logical reasoning or epistemology. And so this was composed in Jewel Cave in Ngulchu. Ngulchu is a place in Tibet by the monk Thokmey Sangpo. That's the name of the author.
다 근데 지리당 네 이제 찾아서 아니 교환석이 가드로 시스라 냠용로시 아 찍변에 미지기 나와이나 신버들래 전수당에 팬토라 스승아가 안데도 시스무스 근데 제가 안 질량은 근데 도보에나 터트니 제라 너무 저런 저기 가르치면데
So now we have covered the 37 practices of all the Bodhisattvas at this point. Now, just as a way to revise what we have studied, maybe it's good to reflect back on our discussions and share our experience of attending these teachings with each other, because I think it is helpful for us as a group to reflect back on it.
What I find most inspiring is the ethical conduct, and I think that acts like as the vessel to then, as the basis to then carry on further practice. So that is something that I look forward to reading more about and inculcating in my day-to-day life.
Kurangla ni loje shuk cheshu chesa disra manzogi tsudim namba thapa sungure la ejora ti ni semla suboda chonsong sra ni shitela zinesra ni kurang juma lobjong ra chego yo na yang sra ti korla nyamlen ro chego yo na shithagarang simne ni chiegi to ba yes
야 그러라
I know if we have time, I would like to share a small
trumji shena digires
So, I mean, if somebody reading these for the first time, of course, they seem like, okay, what is this? Like, I've never thought about it, situations like this. But I think when you've had interactions with these people, after a while, then it kind of, your mind starts to work like that. So there's this one time, actually, I was fostering 2 dogs for a very long time, and they were not very comfortable around people. So they would follow me in the market, and we would just, and somebody passed by one of the dogs like very closely. So just in defense, she bit slightly that person, and it started bleeding very mildly, not something serious. So the person got very angry, extremely angry, and then he was like, I'll beat this dog to death, and he start screaming at me, and in the entire market, it became like a big scene. And for some reason, I could only see in that person that, okay, he also just wants to be happy and not suffer. You know, I could just see that, even though he's shouting at me and being very, very angry. So I just told him that, okay, let's go to the hospital and everything, and we got him treated, got his injections done, paid for everything else, and Yeah, and then while we were coming back, he was just super relaxed and we were laughing about the whole thing. So for me it was like, okay, wow, it could actually change the whole situation. And now whenever we meet each other on the street, we just like smile at each other, and the whole situation is like very amicable. So that was very when put in action, it actually works. That was like a test. Yeah.
Yes. Tene Kurangi Mizigi Nyamnyuro Chichu shaking to the Sonsra. Tene Tanda Ganzugi Mabe Zawa Dendechila Tambo Tambo Longida Inasra. Tadika Chida Chishe de Samsando Yunguresra. The Nedang the Koa Yunguru Yung Sigmari Samsando Yunguresra. And then Yamle the Caborita Sansan Yungures. Yenaya any Ngoy Kayo Laiki Pass Samatan in the Zambani. Nedang dam in the Pepembo Dusra. Penetration and Yima Kurang Chini and Dabujane de Yusra. Any Chini Dabujane de in the Zambani, Chini Budi, this medium the Tibushi damage, and the Deores, and in Yamaji Chini, the Tromla treated the Zambani, Tromla Miyamado Mamboira, any Michi Chidi Damne Kumbajan to the Zamba, Chichi digi Mugin Sarachi, Midla. The Kamba de la Mua de Bet Shuchimbo shoes or Jamasons, it's so jats Mashichemasons, Yena, that Tartalitimotora, Tartalitimoton, the Zampajo de Lunshio Zionus, Pajo Medicashu Jatangeta Koshu, Condozanera, she did a doning I say shagging and Lado, but she Condozadus, Trom Coronalatis, Trubuda Sessons Rakogi, and he cup to this and Korangi. Midi Tradagas, Nuji Mashima de Ra, in I looned the dead of Shuchimbo in the Zamba, and Kurangi middle Abochi Pata in the Zamba, a Kayo Mare, some sound of Tensons Ra, Kailana Koya de other can race Ra, Suin and then Yani do you marry, Dubu do you marry, some Chetosuns. This some Cheto in the Zamba, and Koran Suzo Longshida Lama sons. Any middle symbol relation and the Chidu Maresra, Churang Menkalang to Droll and Menkala Chidruins, and Menkala Chitsamazueda, so Major the Chair, the Samachesa, and it caused Semba Shisa stitching. Any Menkanam Loy on the Zambani, Menkarimba, the Samakurangi Tains, any Jenny Semba Shi, and Gimotazaridus. That is any Yamato in the Zaman and Zuni Chamtaji, Gimotazajius. Chesa the Nezamota in the Zamba, Kayo Laiki, the Zonia Lenduzugi, Pentogados, Chig Gobado, Shuchimbo Tongson.
The Nepentona Didara, Chularing Elas, the answer Jinga Tidigala, this Ra Penaji Chadamus, just say you the Tidigan the name, but that's Ra. No, I'm head Mason answer Nadugala Chule the Didoshita, hand of Shida. And the Nadi Pijam and the Manadi paying Pijamara. Tindrojing on the Kangi Tidigalani. Chige Zabogomugasa and Chapapangasa and Handed Duzuki, Nimbutis the letter Tentuna only chew cochera, Chichimiani.
So, well, then, yes, if it is indeed helpful in approaching situations like this, then this is exactly the point of cultivating a spiritual practice. As we already discussed, that true spiritual practice is cultivated in the face of challenges. And this becomes all the more clear when we begin to understand what we mean by spiritual antidotes, because spiritual antidotes are like medicines. And it will be crazy to eat medicines when we are not sick. But if we are sick and we don't take medicines, then it becomes pointless too. So similarly, if we really are to practice spirituality, then it must be practiced in the face of these kind of challenging situations.
Penando chagi nyembo muduwa gomba ra kundu nyembo shamba gomba ani mari bage nyembo dila tende gomba tizu katu kadi chatuna tidu gala che tene ngone che bangone dire ra nandi ngazo silondo didi senla kangi ya mara zava gongo ya ke munda ra.
So when we look at the manner in which we suffer, or if manner in which we react to suffering, then our mental states affect this in a lot of ways. So if our mental states are consumed by what we call the three poisons of attachment, anger, and ignorance, then our reactions will bring us further suffering. So as such, when we find ourselves in contact with such objects of anger, objects of attachment, objects of ignorance, then it is important to be able to cultivate their particular spiritual antidotes. And that is what a true spiritual practitioner does, that they are able to cultivate love in the face of anger, that they are able to overcome their desire and attachment by appreciating the true reality of the object, and overcome our ignorance by accommodating that there are so many causes and conditions that makes things as such.
The design is long as better shine. Nozalapal, the cardinal, Kina dinner, Shilo donor, Kashisanjun donor, kiddo the Bocavadi, Pedina singing, Tangazu, Shilo Ludi, and a Tusung Nimbudi, Ra, Tinjimi Sosol Kuguada, the Tenshida Pai, Tinga Dina, Pesci me with the Kangi material, Shireda. She's not these Kadin. Nimbudem was a little lots of picture tanches, right? Penangangu is kid in a challenge, Yabuji in Yochu Rosda. Then I say, Chick Pagila Kangi to Lamsan of the Tigipa, maybe such a can the day hang out or the running Sosaranji around card in a kid dinner, and the patient is not another Kangi Matthews.
So, in this day and age, we, whether we are in our house, whether we are outside of our house, we carry our cellular phones with us, and sometimes we take them even when we go to the washrooms, and we basically take them everywhere with us. And now, as opposed to this, as spiritual practitioners, it is important that we take with ourselves the spiritual antidotes with ourselves, to always cultivate the spiritual antidotes with ourselves, not just love, interdependence, and these other things, but to make sure that these spiritual antidotes are embraced by continuous heedfulness, by continuous mindfulness, by continuous vigilance. Because if we are equipped with mindfulness, heedfulness, vigilance in all walks of our lives, then when the poisons, so to say, when these afflictions arise within our mind selves, then we will be able to confront them immediately. We'll be able to apply their particular antidotes immediately. Heedfulness, to ensure that what you are doing is not wrong, not to engage it mindlessly, to understand that there are consequences to your actions, and to ensure that there are no negative consequences to your actions, not only for yourself but for others as well. Payulana karrevasa, payuvalana ta nijula machubara, ni digi susugi kunju digisra, ani debu ra, shela neba, ani rala neba, tendema imbachi, ani payubachaburis.
Tandang Kabala pick Hasharana. Then nothing here, the Mambuting tendencies of Jedo, Ra, Pesanja Marona. That's in the cord and a kabakir, Yaho, Ra. Veggie Lama Sunchudo down. And then the Kindo Homer, much kidder. That's the go she load under the Lamsa Kapa de Lamsa Ludugala, Lamsa Tidiniam de Latana, the Lashaji, Nimbo Sums down, and it ship eyes and then Yam the key, some town. That channel Langala chicken, dam the me, me, Tsitsubula, and King and Bakaritin, Lamsa, 10 way chili. I couldn't with the nature and get shine.
So, I have a particular reason for giving the example of cellular phones, because I know that all of you carry your phones wherever you go. Maybe you do not take it to classes, or maybe you do not take it to the teachings that you attend. But other than that, in all other walks of your life, you carry your cellular phones with you. So as such, when you know that you have your phone with you, please be reminded of this discussion. That just as you carry your phone everywhere with you, also carry within your heart heedfulness, vigilance, mindfulness, love, compassion, and an understanding that things do not come about on their own, but there are always so many different causes and conditions at play. So anyone else would like to share what they learned, their experience?
I can
Yeah, yeah. Chiwayus.
if somebody chooses to go to a cave
Hmm?
and isolate themselves for many years for spiritual practice, is this considered to turn away from the difficulties? And is this not necessary to stay away from certain people in difficult situations?
Tene migashigi pugla sobara. Tabu. Migashigi ridana gi pula solasra. Ani samna dwejoro asta. Takurang chuen nyamlen chi ji chibu samna drogi yin la tesra. Ani chuen nyamlen chi nyi gi gone shenasra. Ani nanganzogi lana jenye trogdo shagore sungyo ras. Jenye di done chitu gore. Ani chugi lamla su done chitu gore sungyo ras. Ani dendegi meji gene susu chibu ani tsamla drogi chuen nyamlen chi gi la nasra. Di nganzogi ani mi mangbo chi nyonde resra. Mi mangbo chi koa nala narde ra. Tezogi chi la pardone khonzo la penta we tsu tsablasra. Susu chibu chuen nyamlen chi gi la pula droya di titis genda da regio manifest.
네 ngara 딩이 마사나도 코뉴라 당아저 로저 치디가 로니시사랑 치깔이 저라 아니 당아저 주마 더니 다 densa칼린 두줄페 로모모 로니시사랑 깔이 저라 근데 보고 춘준이 페이지로에 가르침 참아참아도 미치 샤가 하지 가도 딩갈 깔이 저 되어라 다 딘데 치는데가 안질래야 저트더더셔나 수수기 장샤지 밀 팬토 문도 근데 ngara 엔데로 되니 ini image kundu ngado nyang ko chalen ta ani gomba gomba jang ko chalen so ra tende chongde ani ngado jinka tangsa tende kundu kar songsana chodu chepati ani ngado chi rachel chade drutuni de andam re songsra ani ta nipadi ani so khanshi padi milaba labya ra so chi tagaz ba be ma de ma labya ta tuzure son 아니 숨바디 다 야이 러브노도 드니 마셰와이나 슈소는 라가체 밀러 로바체라지 행간로 다 칸데 짜르르요 오 딘데로 로바체레 송스라 당한테 카도 따오나 지소수의 강시바디 장주디 아니 베제마나 리갈레 러시아주디 장장한테 추미지로 치 통야데 레레도 데 딘데 인사마레 디칼라나 단다칸데 딘데 gondunyale 도니데 코 단다파도 사제요 말라 근데 이 코랑이 또보다 지 신예다다 띵년전에 도절 아니 지 잠바다 hin제도 곰니 코랑 한번 지칼로 사제 고만에 너야 타니르 너야다 사제 고마지 더투나 아니 아마 한번 텔레레가 내가 제투라 당한테 단다 수수게 러는데 미츠나는 미츠 시가 러는 지에니 야 장샤지에 다는 사제 고마도 베트 거랑 가서 거는 연습을 줘요 말아 근데 이디가라야 뒤에 그 리드디 거라서 간시바디 마밀러 아니 디마 주바 밀 펜토로 와라 이네 쪼디야 mondunyan에도 추어도 주바래 그는데 송고다 따티 가르라나 스스 간저 단다 가르모 가르이네 가르모 가르장에는 차다모서 참아 빵 마사디 아니 간저 딘데래야 이 베트 거라 뇌나 마이네 로투에데 안 담부지 인사를
So now I had the same kind of hesitation and I had the same kind of thought because when I look back on how ordained monastics spend almost half of their lives in their studies. So in the classical monastic, in the nunneries, you spend almost 20 years dedicating them to your study of the scriptures and these practices. And then in the monasteries, maybe it's even more than that, 25 years and so forth. So when you spend almost half of your life studying these, then I almost felt that if after you graduate and after you complete your studies, then I felt that maybe it's really pointless to retire into the caves to meditate, because it doesn't really, what you have studied, what you have practiced over the years, now is not really effective and helpful for anyone. This is the same kind of thought that I had. But we have an annual winter retreat wherein nuns from different nunneries gather together. So at such a winter retreat, His Holiness the Dalai Lama addressed us. And at that point, he began to say that now as you have completed your studies, now amongst you, it will be best if you can, after your studies, after all these years of studies, dedicate yourself towards retiring into the caves to meditate and to cultivate your spiritual practice further. And if not, you can now come out into society and begin to teach others and guide others on the spiritual path. And if not, if you're not even able to do that, then you can actively be of service to others by volunteering in hospitals, in these different institutions. So in this, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that in the best case scenario, you should be able to go up to the mountains and to meditate and cultivate your spiritual practice on your own. So I think there is a purpose behind this statement, because when we look at the manner in which we approach our spirituality, it is always mixed with our worldly concerns. And as such, we are not able to dedicate fully to our spiritual practice. Now, the people who take to these caves, they have within themselves come to a decisive conclusion that now I will take it upon myself to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. And they want to pursue this to its extent. So in these caves, they practice shamatha, they practice vipassana, they cultivate boundless love and compassion for all sentient beings, so that they are able to achieve, if not achieve enlightenment in this lifetime, but to come closer to enlightenment, so that when they achieve enlightenment, they can be of service to sentient beings. They can be a guiding light to sentient beings. So this is the reason why His Holiness the Dalai Lama makes the point that at best, if you can, you must be able to dedicate your energies towards retiring to the caves and cultivating your spiritual practice there.
Chidang ada susu la tayar chi chadang mo pe chechu maluna na la chuchu mission da mara ta susu nga kare ha kora chapai na chechu khondo na la chuchu tinde ji susu ha kona yang anzu susu na man rochena nyodo ma suda tidiga le nekap susu pa saja khujoro dewaina kochen da muti diga la ra ta woni nyamne chi thuni ji na tile pa ngazo ta gi nyembo ten thuni na ko khawdo na chiba yamar sinchana tanto nyembo ten samara gyochi samara ra kesi dinde nyembo ten mutu ji susu khondo do sachu ji pe dinde ji waina tanto thomlo ji na ko nezu ma tho ko la pe na chi nezu duja ma the diga la khondo sasa gi khogo ma ya ra dinde ide zoba goma ta na tanto phal le lo dil du du da susu ne dan chi ta ya ra ani tanto ma desan.
So now when I say that true spiritual practitioners with the pure motivation to be of service to sentient beings takes to the mountains and caves to cultivate their practice so they can achieve enlightenment, then I'm not saying that only such people must take to the caves and must be in retreats and so forth. We must be able to appreciate our own mental state and understand and recognize what exactly are our weaknesses. How easy do we give in to these negative emotions and so forth. So if you find yourself easily irritable, easily angered, then it is, I think, helpful at points to go into spiritual retreats from time to time. Because if you are not a seasoned practitioner, then if you try to face adverse situations saying that I want to take this on as a part of my spiritual path, then you become more angry, more irritable when you are in crowded areas, in the general society. So as such, maybe if you really recognize that you are easily irritable, you are easily angered, so then if you want to work on it, then as such, it is helpful sometimes to go into spiritual retreats to recognize how this can be effectively addressed, so that you can gradually overcome these in your interactions in general society.
Penang Pugujila, Pamajila, Pugu Sasha, Pukashi, Longa to the Chibatsu the Nero, Jalasama Jashan, and over the Lord or Go, Mila Shu, Damachini, Puguchinjina. Pamadi Shulanga, the Pay Kula, Sendelang, that in your language. Jalmi Jala Chashes. Yanachi me Pugushambala Doshian and Damar Taco Pele Shulul Tai in Kalo. Singamda Royer, Nalo Nyagua. That Puguchiki, Pay Lily Card and Mitsama Tempo Jabatavana, Katans and Dida. Chitangazu Narazu Lodi, Susan Majo, Shanato, the Chiki, Chanty, Zochujina, Annie, they such a Yambal dear. So caught on a missing donare, she Kagusimbo donor, Susan and Joy came you, Ranje Netuna, Cardin Shivanda.
So it's similar to a parent who would be hesitant to send a child who is very easily irritable, who is very rough in their manner, outside immediately, because they would think about how this child will cause trouble, not only for themselves, but for others. Now, as opposed to that, if a parent has a child who is well-mannered, who gets along with everybody, then the parent doesn't hesitate about sending such a child outside on their own. So similarly, we should be able to reflect on our mental states and our propensity or our habitual tendencies in this manner and realize what works for us in a given particular situation. So I think it is helpful that if we come to recognize that indeed we have some problems with being easily irritated, being easily angered, then maybe taking some time to be in spiritual retreats can be helpful. So we can work on this and address them on our own.
Manzu Karasungula, Tuba maybe Gombadi Ladun Talan Zambaisra. Susula Tuba, the Chisano Tayada, the Legita, Nambegi Tolashan, Shanhi Jet, Antonio Toviloda, Ani Chigi, Tanda Chadam Gona Dando, Takanda Tenechi Machine, Pay Gomja, Kambatumba, the energy deoina, Gomja machine, Mali the mid Delingajitsa, Teletados, Teldangera. Susa Sanu Tansaki, Shiji Yuaina, Tigala, Sano Tang. The Canadian Bocandam attended the Mount Shulumate, Saint Lulu, Shiva, mix it and I don't want in the tongue to his chair. Kissi didn't me by in a letter, Pagate to the son of Diajimi and Chick Chatham wasn't to return the Sajishila, Gomjagilanaya, the Tata de Gomara.
Now, with that being said, I think it is important to understand the correct approach towards a spiritual retreat, wherein many people associate spiritual retreat with meditation. Now, it is important to understand that one cannot immediately jump towards practicing meditation, that there is a process through which you approach meditation. So in the Buddhist context, we place a lot of importance on that causal process, how one cannot immediately begin to expect to effectively conduct meditation on your own. You must study first, then contemplate, and on the basis of study and contemplation, then you can begin to meditate. Without the first two, if you immediately begin to meditate, then the meditation cannot be effective at all. What exactly are you going to meditate on? And how exactly are you going to meditate? You have no instructions at all. So we say that without study and contemplation, and approaching meditation in this manner is similar to expecting to climb a cliff without your limbs. This is impossible. So as such, it is important that we first at least study some teachings, some instructions, and then contemplate on what we want to meditate on. Love, compassion, emptiness, interdependence, whatever we want to meditate on, to contemplate on these. If we have received any instructions, that's what we call study. And then on basis of that study, we need to be able to contemplate on these teachings on our own. And then that comprehension, that understanding, we take into meditation, to be able to imbibe this, to be able to gain a conviction in these teachings through meditation, so that these reflects in our behavior, attitude. And it should not be the case that you go into a spiritual retreat and then when you come out of it, you are all the more angry, you are all the more easily irritated. That should not be the case. It should be the case that meditation and retreats help you to calm yourself, help you to understand yourself better.
Disan zanzang the loneliness la nasilida. Ra sometimes shimi ba ani susu chibu de dena ani chibu na za na inga da. Ra sometimes shenji na ani ko dende kora gomdi jana se bit same shiwa lele. Ra dende chawara. Sometimes shimi ba ji na ani kora sanlo jacha ma tama ji da ngara chi pore sukan ta sa ene ro ya ma the de bit hezu bo cha inga. Ra
So without a foundational understanding of ourselves, of what we want to do, then solitude for some people is loneliness. Solitude for the practitioner is peace and calm.
단나가서 디가라 리트 되네요. 뭐지선 캄바 친지제 안에 그런 짓게 대산도 친지 대지라 대산 친지제 아니 이마 간도 코란도 배 텔러더라. 쇼게야라 아니 샤도체 인체피 가진 아니 간도체 근데 건서 칼라시고 타제부지 뭐라 리트라니 직장마로 가려는 심볼사 안데 질레 코란도 미트니다 데리오라 이제 마실마 테나 마 파페고 너 코사나다 시지라 코라게 지 장샤주도 사나다 된다. 다 지금 가서 장바치에 매주처럼 캄바돈 받는 데라네. कुछ 데라 가요. 아. हमने कल चीज़ टीवी रो फोन रो चिताया में ना पेकाले खबर हाँ ता दिने के कंबा दिला को लो देवर लो जेगु चुका चीज़ दिने रिकाल पे मुंबई तो पंदुलता नहीं यहाँ से बता यहाँ ठोबा दिन रहता रा
And we need to also appreciate that meditation is a process of familiarization. We cannot expect to effectively be able to meditate on our own immediately because there are many practitioners who live in secluded hermitages in this area itself, and when we look at when you look at how they live their lives, they really do not struggle to find things to do. They are busy throughout the days. They have a clear idea about what they want to dedicate their times to. So from the moment they wake up, they have their practices, and they do not let themselves become too distracted with what they want to eat, what they want to wear. The food that they eat is very simple, but they go about their life in these secluded hermitages, days on end, years on end, with the same kind of peace, calm. Now, if you place someone who has no training at all in an empty house, then maybe they struggle even after the first hour. You immediately begin to miss your phone sometimes because you want to be distracted. So as such, it takes time to train our attention. It takes time to build a habit.
배치 아시지 록다운 그 사고다. 남들 가서 배 드러들 하고 말아. 디디츠 셔라더니 가시 아르땡도만 실론로서 게실로만 첨래. 고자제시나 총단들이라. 라. 가시 그거 야부 쉬어 중락이다. 다 공부 타선도 뭐네 그래. 나라 진행바 사고야도 지금 당한서 다안인 점점 하더들이 언로 시가도 붕붕들이 케마물랭 거라. 또서 참마사에 거거라. 생제제미 기부 쉬어 중슬라니. 가시안지 붙이 정말서 실로 로엠 사야라면서 참여라면서 다들 쉬운 양스도 가시네 시마 되게라니. 라 산한단달라리다. 근데 뭐 저도요.
And we need not look further than the experience that we had during the lockdown. During the coronavirus lockdown, many people had different reactions to the lockdown. Some people became really, really frustrated that they jumped over fences, they want to go about, get some fresh air, they couldn't keep themselves to themselves at all. Whereas some people found the time very meaningful. They were able to dedicate the time to things that they want to pursue. So in the monasteries, most of the monks will say that they enjoyed this. Monks and nuns would say that they enjoyed this time because now they were able to really focus on their practice, free from any commotion, free from any kind of engagements, societal engagements, meaningless engagements. So as such, they found this time very, very meaningful and effective. So it really depends on the manner in which you mentally approach a situation.
다 단다로 있는 추런스 네 참아 장사대 안장에 전서 땅 안디가라 지기 산노 땅도 그저지 되어 있는 수수 나올 되어 있는 산땅도 땅에 시자지라 되어라. 디스스 라발이었다.
So now we are better off than we were in lockdown actually. Now we have studied something like this, so we have a basis upon which we can begin to contemplate on our own and begin to see for ourselves whether we can inculcate this as a part of our spiritual practice.
아니 수제체라.
Okay, then we break for tea.
아니 제라야 오늘 좋아지네.
Then as we gather again, we will make time for questions, doubts.